Hey everyone, a big welcome to the Forge Ahead show, hosted by me, Nick Elston, inspirational speaker, creator of unique mental health engagement strategies, a transformational speaking coach, and a mentor to have in your corner. The Forge Ahead show brings you the storytellers, the influencers, the people who have gone from adversity to excitement, forging something better, something beautiful, something powerful. So stay tuned, dive in, and be inspired by today's very special guest. Hey everyone, and a big welcome back to the Forge Ahead Show, Season 2, Episode 17. Time is flying. Another amazing guest to bring you this week in the shape of my good friend, Adam Owen. Big round of applause for Adam.
Hey. Hello, Nick. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much. Very good. I was going to read out this intro about you, but it sounds brilliant. Do I let you do this yourself? Yeah, you introduce you, and if you don't cover anything, I'm going to big you up myself.
Thank you. Well, Nick, we've known each other for a good while now, haven't we? And I am amazed though that we're at Season 2, Episode 17 before I get to come on your amazing show as well. So we must have words about that. I didn't realise I was so far down the guest list.
Consider myself reprimanded.
But no, we've known each other a while, so a very, very brief introduction in terms of what I do. I've largely been in financial services. I started off years ago in food retail. I was a manager in Sainsbury's, so I provided the people of Manchester with yogurt, but then decided that that possibly wasn't my true calling, and decided to move into financial services. So I became a financial planner, and then got involved in over the years a whole series of things, including compliance and audit, and lots of things that are involved in regulation. Then moved into training and helping people, first of all, with their technical skills in financial services, but then began to get more interested in communication skills and the art of communication, and how people can use their communication skills to begin to influence others around them, but then also to make changes more broadly, and how people can affect people all around them and improve lives. And so latterly, although I still work predominantly in and around financial services, a lot of the work that I do now with my very good friend and colleague Kate Holmes is working on how we use video and mostly live interaction in order to connect with people and actually find those connections when we may not be in a world where we're actually always able to physically meet. So it's been an interesting and quite accelerated 12 or 18 months really in that part of things.
I love that word, interesting. My favorite author, Terry Pratchett, covers it as a whole manner of sins. Interesting certainly covers that. The Bringer of Yogurt. I've got this kind of like dairy-themed heavy metal band name that just really sounds really, really cool. The Bringer of Yogurt. I love that.
I think most definitely, the dairy goods or something like that would have been a thing. I was never quite, I never quite had the voice for heavy metal, really. I think my voice was a little bit too soft for that. But yes, definitely down. You could always find me humming down the cheese aisle at least.
So in terms of music, actually, let's go there. What is your choice of music?
Oh, it's strange. You maybe wouldn't necessarily believe it to look at me, but I ended up being the singer in a band for a little while. We were a covers band in and around Manchester. Do we have time for me to share the story of how I ended up being the singer in a band?
Yeah, you please do. Yeah, definitely.
So I was working in a business, and it was one of my colleagues' 50th birthday was coming up, and his name is Keith. And I turned to Keith and I said, Keith, tell me, 6 months from your 50th, what is on your bucket list? What is the big thing you want to do? And he said, you know what, Ad, I'd really like to be the lead singer of a band. And I just was beginning to enter my midlife crisis. So like you, I've been and got myself a guitar and put it on the wall behind me. And so I'd just been learning guitar at this point. And I said, well, you know what, Keith, I play a bit of guitar. And I turned to Dave, who was sat with us. I said, Dave, do you play an instrument? He said, no. I said, well, you can be the bassist then. We'll go and get you a bass and we'll form a band. slightly throwaway way. So, I do quite often find that when I start these things, they tend to happen. And Keith, particularly, is somebody who likes to take action. So a couple of weeks later, Keith came back and he said, "I've booked us the venue." I said, "What venue, Keith?" He said, the venue for from the performance on my birthday. I booked the venue for my birthday. I said, "Oh, well, that sounds great." Thinking, okay, we seem to be committed now a little. I said, "Where is it?" He said, "It's at the railway venue in Bolton." Now, the railway venue in Bolton, it sadly isn't open anymore, but it was probably one of the UK's premier small music venues at the time. And he booked it for solstice night. It was a Saturday. I said, "Keith, how on earth have you managed to get a private party at the railway venue in Bolton on a Saturday night at the height of summer? How have you managed that?" He said, "Oh, no, it's not a private venue, Ad. We're the band for the night." Now, the railway venue at Bolton had top names perform there. We'd never played a note together. Most of us couldn't play a note anyway. We had 6 months. So we went to our first rehearsal a couple of weeks later. Turns out that keeping musical time and singing in tune was not necessarily a strength of any of us in this particular band. And we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And we got to our 6 months later, Keith's birthday, and we had a smashing night. There were a couple of hundred people there at this venue on that night, and They weren't all family and friends. So we had a smashing night, and I think our greatest claim to fame for that iteration of this band was that the landlord said we weren't the worst band he'd ever had on.
Take that.
Take that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if he ever had Take That, but I would definitely take that. Nice. And so so it was so that was that, and then we carried on for a little while, and I took some lead singing duties in this what became a covers band that did some pubs and things around Manchester until our drummer found other things to do, and typical thing of we all busy lives, musical differences, but we played all sorts from Bowie right the way through to sort of 70s, sort of edging into punk, and then moving into sort of that Manchester sound of the Stone Roses and others. So we played a whole plethora of songs that people can tap their feet to in a fairly reasonable but not particularly musical fashion.
Amazing. I love that. This is what I love about the show. You get to know the real people behind everything. And we were introduced from a previous guest, Mr. Chris Budd, originally back at the first iteration of our contact, and we've recently had Kate Holmes on as well. So we've heard from Kate recently too, and you are now the very special guest today from the NextGen community, of which you are director and head of content. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. That's what they call me.
Excellent. And we have Dan Graham, who's just booked on to come on very soon after you. So who is NextGen? You're all over the place on my stuff, but people asking, who is NextGen and what are you about?
Well, NextGen was formed. We have our story that it was two disgruntled financial planning northerners in a pub, and I'm sure this plays out for so many different professions, doesn't it? That actually, there's the establishment, there's the profession, and then there are people who are trying to break into the profession. NextGen was really an antidote to the establishment from the perspective of the types of events and things that people were going to didn't seem to cater for new entrants and younger people coming into the profession. So my good friends and colleagues, another Adam Carolan and Roman Sivajoti, they got together and they formed a Facebook group, or I think it was a Facebook group, and it turned out that they'd hit a little bit of a nerve. They'd found something that people really did respond to, and that there was clearly a demand. So of course, what do you do if you are a group of younger financial planners who are seeking to challenge the establishment and to create something new that isn't produced by a bunch of white middle-aged men in the profession, as you come and find a white middle-aged man to help you with it, don't you? So they contacted me and they said, "You've got a bit of experience in this type of stuff. Do you think that we could do something else with this? Could we actually begin to build some of these structures?" And of course, I had quite a lot of experience in the strategic side of the financial planning profession. So I said, I think we probably can. I think it probably needs it. It would be a great thing to do. So we now provide support from universities right the way through to people preparing to take positions in senior roles. So classroom to boardroom, looking at technical skills, but then looking at soft skills, managerial skills, leadership skills. We look at everything that really helps people get really good at what they do so that they can make a real difference to their clients' lives. And that's really our biggest focus. We've created a private social network, which we've now over 500 members in, and we have a partner network called the Financial Advisor Mentorship Group, which has another couple of hundred members in. So we're just over 700 in the UK now. And there it just gives people the opportunity to share ideas, to collaborate, to do some crazy things that we do and bring people together to do challenges. Because what we find is when people have the opportunity to collaborate and to work together, then they bond and it builds community, but also they amplify what they can achieve. And so really our focus now is very much on that. It's to help people to amplify what they can achieve by bringing them together with other people to work, collaboratively.
See, you mentioned, I think it's amazing. Like I said, it really is a big chasm in the industry between the old school versus the route that you're taking, and each one of you have a very slightly different take on that within that as well. And I think that really shines through in the community. I've never met a community so vibrant, but also still diverse within that niche. And it's an amazing place to be as an outsider, not just from the industry, but also from the NextGen community coming in. Then I just find it a really welcoming place. And I think it's an amazing thing that you guys have built. The Speaker and Influencer program is something that I've been brought in to help you with over recent times. The reach is crazy. I mean, it's South Africa, it's Australia, it's the US. We mentioned Kate Holmes already, and for the eagle-eyed amongst you, she doesn't come from Bristol or Manchester. So how did that kind of relationship start, and how is that looking in terms of global reach, especially over the past 15 months, I guess, with lockdown in the virtual world?
Yes, and thank you, very complimentary. But the Speaker and Influencer program was born out of a frustration that I have, and something that has been sort of bubbling up in me for quite some time. That in our profession, if you go to an event, then what you will see is somebody, largely, most of the time, you will see a lot of people who look and sound a lot like me, and who have ideas that are often very similar to people who look and sound a lot like me. And there's nothing wrong with people who look and sound a lot like me. I've got nothing against people who look and sound a lot like me. I am one. But what I think we were lacking inclusion. We talk about diversity. And we talk about that we should see a broad range of people. But to do that, you have to be inclusive. You have to create circumstances and processes that enable people to feel safe and secure, and that they actually can do something. I have spent much of my life being told that of course I can do it, and believing entirely that of course I can do it. And I don't ever recall a time where somebody has asked me to do something and I've thought at any point, I'm not sure if I'm able to do that. I've just sort of said yes, because I've always been told that you can. But that is something that is born out of a level of privilege that I have because of the way I look and the way I sound and where I live and all of those things. And I think for me, if we're going to change the face of a profession, if we're going to include lots of people in that, then you have to look at how you design and construct the processes that create an end result. And in this instance, the end result we're talking about is a conference. And a couple of years back, I was sat in the last live conference that we did, and I produce these things, and so put together the speaker list and all the rest of it. And I was at the back of the conference venue, and we had on stage one of my heroes and a number of books and all the rest of it. And I was feeling quite pleased with myself because my job was done. It was halfway through the day. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. I had a fantastic speaker on the stage. It all looked great. But as I looked around, what I realized was that there were a lot of people in the audience who weren't really focusing that much on our stage speaker, the person that I'd spent much of our budget on getting to that stage. They were actually quite interested in chatting with each other. So they were looking over and waving at their friends and saying hi, because we built this community where people actually love spending time together. They don't get to do it in person all that often. It's mostly online. So when they're in person, they want to be together. And I suddenly realized that the conference was getting in the way of everyone getting to talk to their friends and to meet and to socialize and to extend that network. So that was a spark. That got me thinking that what I really need to do is put, the people who are in the audience on stage. But then that sort of got us thinking to that bigger purpose, which is, if you're going to change the face of conferences in a particular niche in our profession, then you need to change the way that they are put together. Because oftentimes it is a case of you go to a provider or you go to somebody and say, do you have a speaker that can speak on X topic? And they will say, yes, here is a speaker who can speak on X topic. But all of those speakers look and sound very much the same. They're all called David or John or Mark, and they all look very similar, and they all get on stage and they do a brilliant job, but there isn't a great deal of variety. And so to change the process, to actually make the criteria for speaking at the conference not can you confidently speak in public. That isn't one of our criteria for selecting people, because we have this new program, this new way of doing it. Our criteria for selecting people are, have you had this opportunity before? And our preference is that most people who speak at our conferences haven't. And secondly, do you have an interesting idea that the world should hear? And if you meet those two things, then pretty much you qualify to be a speaker at our conference, because we have the Speaker and Influencer program, which you've been a key part of this year, to actually help to train people and to empower them and to help them feel confident in getting their message out there and in speaking in public. So we turn it on its head. In doing that, we can set certain criteria for the selection of our conference speakers. So we can say there is an absolute 50-50 gender split. We can choose 50 men and 50 women of our 100 speakers, because once we know that they don't have to have the skills of public speaking, and so they don't have to have done it before. Because here's a challenge: if you're looking for somebody who has spoken on a stage in financial planning before, chances are it's a man, and that's Absolutely. Our expectation. And so when you call out for, can anyone who's done a reasonable amount of public speaking before contact us to join our conference, we get hundreds of men responding. But actually we need to change that. And so we can change things on the basis of gender. How do we change things on the basis of ethnic diversity? And when we are in a community and in a profession where still the vast majority of people are white, well, we can go global, can't we? There's a phrase that has sort of taken hold that is used quite a lot in boardrooms around the country, BAME, Black and Minority Ethnic. Yeah. And it's not a phrase I'm massively comfortable with, if I'm honest, because I recognize that when I talk to my friends and colleagues in Malaysia or Pakistan or anywhere in the world that isn't predominantly white, then actually there is no Black and Minority ethnic. I am in the minority when I'm having conversations, but actually no one refers to me as WAME. No one says white and minority ethnic. And so,
just to bring how do we get
absolutely. How do we get a broader variety of people on the stage? Then we open it up and we go global. And so last year at our conference, we had our first version of the Speaker and Influencer program. We had 30 people from the UK, and we brought them together, went through the program, and we were going to do it on a in-person conference, but of course lockdown happened, so we had to go online. And then in doing so, we also launched our breakfast show. During lockdown, we thought, how do we get people together and keep them just pointing in the right direction every morning and bring the community together? Why don't we run a little Zoom breakfast show, which we launched. I hosted the first episode. It was terrible, but actually the second episode, some people came back. And so our audience returned. So we thought, well, we'll do this. Second episode was pretty ropey as well. By the fourth episode, the Thursday, it was getting a bit better. Although I did manage to call our main guest by the wrong name, which was a bit of a disaster. By the end of the second week, I'd stopped presenting it. And we had some members of our community doing a brilliant job at presenting it. And it just sort of took off. And we had this breakfast show. And so I thought, well, there's an 8:30 in the morning, because that's when the show used to go out. Every time zone around the world, 24 times in a day. So why don't we, as part of our conference week, run a 24-hour breakfast show? And nobody, Nobody had a strong enough objection for us not to do it. Let's put it that way. You know, there were a few people said, "Are you mad?" But nobody actually said, "Don't do that." So we planned this breakfast show. And Adam Carolan had been on Kate Holmes's podcast quite close to that time. He said, "You know who we should involve in this? We should involve Kate Holmes. Kate's running this amazing podcast. It's global. She has guests from all over the world. If anybody can help us find great people for this and can really help us create this breakfast show and make it global, Kate is the person." So I reached out to Kate. We started chatting. Kate was immense throughout the whole planning process and the whole delivery of that particular show. We did our 24-hour breakfast show. We ran it like a telethon for charity. So we had amazing people who were doing charity fundraising. At the time, Gretchen Betts did 24 hours of crafting. She came on every show and did a new thing that she crafted every 24 hours. Steve Martin did what was effectively some sort of huge Iron Man, a lockdown Iron Man style thing. Andrew Cook rode. We had so many people. We had James Mousley was flipping giant tires. I'm not really quite sure exactly what that was, but I remember we kept cutting back to James, and he had a camera set up, and all I could see was his backside as he was flipping these tires constantly, looking more and more exhausted. But it was a great experience. We then ran our conference. And a couple of days later, having had very little sleep, I'd been awake for I don't know how long. And, the whole thing sort of came together. And so for this year, it seemed sensible, and I know sensible is quite a bizarre word, but it seemed sensible to actually combine the two. Why don't we run a global conference celebrating financial planning all over the world, based in 4 countries, but that take in different time zones, and just do that on the basis that we can extend the speaker and influencer program. We can have 100 speakers instead of 30 that we had last year. We can visit different countries, learn different things. The 100 speakers are not all talking about finances and money. They're talking about things related to financial planning, but they're also talking about things that to help people to run businesses, things that help people to focus. They're talking about inspiration. They're talking about how reading can actually improve your well-being. We've got whole sections on well-being. We've got sections on leadership. So it's a really broad range. And this is the really interesting thing for me, is that when you ask somebody, have you got an idea? Then invariably they will say, yes, of course I've got an idea. And then when you say, would you like to share it with the world? They say, no, I don't want to do that. I've never done anything like that before. Thank you very much. So, what we have to ask is, have you got an idea? And then we ask, would you like us to help you share it with the world? Just this one. And, that start point, that beginning of that journey for somebody is really important. From the conference speakers last year, so many of them have gone on to do much more conference speaking and public speaking this year, to the point at which I jumped onto one of the major magazine publications in financial services that they're running a conference in the end of the year in Harrogate, and 4 of the speakers that were at our conference last year are speaking at that conference. And that's what we want to see. If we can encourage people to find their voice and share their ideas, then we get a really broad range of ideas, and we begin to just spread new messages, and we begin to innovate, and we begin to change people's styles, and we begin to inspire another generation of people to think, this is a cool thing to do. And those people don't all look like me. Not that there's anything wrong with looking like me. I don't want any white middle-aged men out there to think I'm bashing white middle-aged men. We've got some white middle-aged men on this year's conference. It's okay, they're included. But I don't think it has to be exclusively white middle-aged men that speak at these things. And so we can make a significant change, I think.
I think you're right. You touched on so many things there, which is fascinating for me with kind of my efforts with the public speaking academies that I run, or even actually within an organization as well. I go in at the room from a position of not being within a community. So there are individuals in the same room, and they're absolutely kind of sometimes crippled, but certainly held back by those traditional kind of, like you said, that conditioning behavior of not having a voice, not feeling entitled or empowered to be able to be there, giving any opinion. what I found is with the NextGen community, it's kind of like it acts as a leveler, that actually it's within a community. You can have, like you said, that 50-50 split. I mean, people on here have heard till they're blue in the face still about the gender imbalance in professional speaking. Why is it when I run my speaking academies that last month, 90% were female in the room, but when I get to professional stages, as you said, that 90% are male? There's a disconnect. But what you're actually doing, whether intentionally or not intentionally, is that it acts as a leveler, because you've taken away all the old rules and you're throwing in your own new rules. And actually those new rules are a lot more inclusive by default. The other interesting thing I found with your community, and genuinely not saying this, I work with a lot of communities, a lot of organizations and a lot of spaces. The one thing I found that's really key is that people are far more prepared to be vulnerable in your community, to be very open, even if it was just to me through kind of emails and conversations, than any other space I've seen in the financial community generally. Generally, I didn't go for the right word, I question myself, but broadly across the financial sector, your space has been far more likely to be vulnerable, to be open, to even be authentic, and putting that into their little presentations that are doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think you're kind of giving people that permission. I talk a lot about people are waiting for permission to let themselves shine in that sense. And I think we're all at different stages. I still think I get in my own way a lot of the time as well. We've had that conversation directly, very open about that. But actually, there's stages to this. And I think what you're doing is you're giving people a way that they didn't think was possible. And you're changing so many people's lives, personally and professionally. How does that make you feel?
It's a really interesting question. I wasn't expecting that to come off the back of your compliments there, Nick. So thank you very much, of course. But I wasn't expecting you to ask me, how does it make me feel? You know, I don't very often sit and reflect how it makes me feel, because it's an easy thing to say this, really, but there's so much work to do, and there really is so much work to do in all of this, that I don't really often give myself time to reflect and think, okay, how does it make me feel? I think I'm very satisfied with the progress that we are making so far. How might it make me feel in the future is maybe a different question. But right now, we're at the tip of an iceberg, and we're looking to really make some big breakthroughs if we're going to change the face of a profession. Then we do have such a lot of work to do. When I speak to colleagues who aren't empowered, who don't get the opportunities, who are struggling to find their voice, who don't feel that they can share, and certainly not safely and confidently, then you think, well, actually, I haven't got time to feel too much about it yet, because we've got a lot of work to do. But one day I'd like to look back and be, really content with the contribution that I've made. I started off a few years ago when, the NextGen Planners opportunity came about. I started off talking about the fact that we should, if we work hard, we should look to leave whatever we're doing in a better state than when we found it, or when we came to it. And I used to talk in small terms. We should leave it in a little better than when we found it. But actually, the older I get, and the fewer Christmases I have in front of me, because I'm 48 this year, and if I lived to as long as my dad lived, I've got 22 more Christmases, Nick. I count my life in Christmases. It helps to focus matters somewhat. And I think that I think we should try and make big change. I've now reached the conclusion that actually small change, leaving it a little better than I found it, that's fine. But actually, why settle for a little better? Why not look to really push the boundaries? Because if by me pushing the boundaries, and NextGen Planners pushing the boundaries, and the community of NextGen Planners pushing the boundaries, if we all make it a little better, then at least we've shown the way for people who come in the next generation and the next generation to look to then push harder. You've got to sometimes just try things to show other people that it might be possible, even if you fail. Failure is not an option, isn't a sentence that actually crops up in NextGen Planners, because failure is the thing that we grow from. It's there's Absolutely. Almost at times an expectation that it won't work. But why not try it anyway? Why not get out there and do it? Give it a go. We did our write a book in a day challenge, which you were involved in before Christmas. And,
Yes.
write a book in a day. When I voiced that and the team heard me say, we're going to write a book in a day, they didn't say no. They said, are you sure? But they didn't say no. And they said, yeah, what we'll do, we'll get a group of volunteers together. We probably need about 30 people. Each of them we can bring together into a team, because when we collaborate, we achieve so much more. So we'll bring them into teams of 2 or 3. We'll get them to choose a chapter and they'll write a chapter. Everybody during the day writes a chapter. By the time we've done, we've got a 40,000 word book. We got to 41,500 words in a day.
Wow.
And when, if we'd have said to any of the 30 odd people that came together to do that, would you like to write a book? They'd say, well, yeah, but I haven't got time. I haven't got time to be the author of a book. But when you collaborate, you do. And this is the thing. I'm a massive fan of challenging people. And I don't mean that figuratively. I mean it literally. We set challenges. We say, we are going to do X in this amount of time. And come and join us and let's see if we can do it. And when you challenge people like that, when it is a finite amount of time, when they know they don't have to commit to it indefinitely, and they can do it in a short space of time, and let's see how far we get. And while we do it, we'll have fun and we'll collaborate. Then people really do then just step up. And because they know, write a book in a day, they know they're not going to have to commit to a year's worth of their life writing a book. They can be in and out. And, it was a Friday. So Friday morning, they turn up. Friday evening, they're back home with their family. And they are now an author of a book, which will be published hopefully very shortly.
Amazing.
We're just in the process of the typesetting. The whole thing is going live.
I mean, on the show, we hear from, on the Forge Ahead show, we have counselors, coaches, mentors, and the common theme has been to kind of have those conversations with who counselors have counselors, mentors have mentors, coaches have coaches. What or who inspires you?
I think it's actually the people who are in the community that inspire me most. When you hear their stories and when you see what they're willing to do, in the UK, NextGen planners community, I'm called the head of content. In the US, in Kate's community, I operate in the IAC community as well. Kate has called me head of wild ideas, fun and wild ideas, I think she's called me. It's just it. It's just an idea. I have an idea, and then other people say, yes, go on then, we'll do that. As crazy as it might be, or as not crazy as it might be, we'll do that. Yes, we'll all get involved. I had a conversation earlier today with a member of our community, and we had a little gap in our conference for a host for 4 hours. It's in the middle of the night. It's 3 a.m. That this gap has occurred. And I picked up the phone to him and I said, it's Tom Parkinson. I'll name check Tom because Tom's brilliant. I said, Tom,
great guy.
I know it's only it's 10 days off. I've got a little gap. It's just an ask. Is there any chance you'd feel like just doing a few hours hosting the conference and just doing some intros, etc.? But it is overnight. He said, oh, what do you mean by overnight, Adam? Is it like early morning? I said, well, it's very early morning. It's 3 a.m. He just said, yes. He said, I'll do it. And it's those people that inspire me. It's everybody who is willing to contribute, because we look at that and we think, well, actually, that's our society as well. We look at the last 18 months that we've been through with COVID and all of those, thousands and thousands of volunteers and people who've stepped up during a pandemic to think of others and to think, right, what can I do? And to just ask, what can I do? People generally are inspiring, but for me, it's not about leaders who are in those positions who inspire. Yes, there are inspirational leaders. There are also some who aren't very inspirational, as we know, but there are inspirational leaders. There are people that you can point to and say, God, these people are inspiring. But actually, it's the people who emerge who aren't actually in positions of seniority or leadership. It's those people who step forward when you're not expecting them to step forward and say, I'll do that. I'll take that on. I'll help. Where can I help? That's the sort of thing that really inspires me. And, and that's what keeps me going with this, really, because it's a case of I know that, my job in this community is to create the opportunity for people to come forward and, to do this great work. So I just come up with daft ideas and then the inspirational people step forward and do it.
Not a bad job. Head of daft ideas. Love that. That's crazy. So you are the head of, or one of the heads of the community of, you say 500 members. How do you kind of safeguard your own mental health? How do you safeguard your own family or downtime when it comes to managing a community which is always on? How do you avoid any overwhelm or disconnection at all?
That's an interesting question. And, a lot of it is by having very, very clear rules. And this is this is for me the important thing, is having really clear rules. I have very clear rules in business when I'm taking on new clients. My rules in business are very simple but very clear, so that I avoid dealing with people that I don't want to work with. And there's a particular phrase I use, which probably isn't repeatable for a daytime show, Nick, but there's a particular phrase I use that always helps me remember not to take on a job with anybody that is going to cause me difficulty. But then when we think about the community, and it is always on, it's having clear parameters in the community as well. NextGen Planners is a no moan zone. And so, nobody moans. It's really simple. We set that up as the first primary rule. It's a no moan zone. Anybody who does, we very quickly contact them and say, look, just reminding you that it's a no moan zone, and they don't do it again. And so it's not positivity for positivity's sake. It's just supportive and collaborative, and people ask questions and other people give them answers. Nobody is there slagging anybody off, not within the community or externally outside of the community. There's nobody in the community saying, look at what these people are doing over here. That just doesn't happen. So that helps. But the other thing, of course, is if you can be lucky enough, and there are so few people, and I feel very, very fortunate in this, if you can be lucky enough to create a set of circumstances and be fortunate enough to be able to choose what you do for a living, and if what you do for a living is a joy, then actually it doesn't really feel like work, and it doesn't really feel like it interrupts with the other great stuff, family and all of those things. In terms of protecting my mental health and my well-being, most of the time I sit in the garden when it's sunny and I work there. My job, Nick, is to talk to people. That is one of the nicest jobs in the world, isn't it? Just to chat to people all day long. Yeah, it's not really a job. I'm slightly embarrassed that I call it my work. When other people say, what do you do? I always want to say something physical and manual that that actually is hard work that creates sweat. Because my job doesn't. The only time I sweat in my job is literally if it's a bit warm outside and I haven't got a parasol up. That's about as much sweating as I will do. So, for me, it's, it is a joy. And if you can find a job that is a joy, then do that job more and do it as much as you can, and practice it and find opportunities for it until you do it all the time. Because it wasn't always like that for me. There were a lot of times where I would be doing a job that I wasn't enjoying, where there was a lot of stuff that's like, I'd rather be somewhere else. I'd rather be at home. I'd rather be with my family. I'd rather be out with friends. Whereas now, I don't do my job and ever think I would rather be somewhere else. I'm sat doing my job thinking I'm enjoying this. And, oftentimes, again, if it's warm and we're in the garden, Andrea will be sat next to me whilst I'm doing some of my job. And she gets a bit bored when I'm twittering on about, technical financial planning things. And she used to be in the profession, so she knows what I'm talking about, and she rolls her eyes. She sometimes nudges me to correct me on a technical error as well that I'll make. But, generally, it is a joy, so I don't have to be overly protective simply because it doesn't really count for work sometimes. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Mate, I could talk to you for hours, but for the sake of the show and for the audience, we better wrap it up here. But before I go, I want to ask you the question I ask everybody. It's something I've actually used with your community as well. So I'm now the MC of the O2 Arena. 20,000 people paid our hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing, whatever your thing is, bringing yogurt, singing, that kind of stuff. I'm just about to call you to the stage and your walk-on music kicks in. What would that walk-on track be?
I would go back to somebody I mentioned at the very beginning. It would be Bowie, and it would be Moon Age Daydream. And for me, apart from the fact it's just a banging tune, isn't it, Moon Age Daydream? But for me as well, that it's, it's an investigation and exploration in decadence and humanity, and how actually we can chase all of these things and all of this science and all of these cool new modern things, but actually we can lose our humanity along the way. And it's something that I think it's a great thing to come on to, because it's got just an opening riff which is awesome, but then beyond that I think there's a message in there as well.
Absolutely. And that, along with every other suggestion from this season, will be in the playlist available at the end of season 2, whenever that may be. That's just rolling and rolling and rolling. However, for today, big thank you to my good friend Adam, Owen.
Nick, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for sharing with such clarity. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. For everybody else, please stay tuned for episode 18 coming very, very shortly. We have another amazing guest to bring you. So please do subscribe and follow and all that jazz. And I'll see you again soon. Take care. Be well. Stay happy. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. And that's a wrap. A big thank you for tuning in to today's show. Please stay tuned and hit subscribe for future episodes, bringing you amazing guests, sharing amazing content and amazing insights. Really excited to bring you these. The Forge Ahead show is sponsored by nickelston.com. If you want to connect with me, you can find all the ways possible through the website. If you want to drop me a message, always great to hear from you. But in the meantime, if I don't catch you before, I'll see you at the next episode. And you take care, guys. Cheers now. Bye. Bye-bye.